Howdy, howdy, everyone. Can I say howdy, DC? Do you have any natural National Harbor people here, residents here? Okay, okay. Just checking. Anyone go on the Ferris wheel? Nice. I saw a graphic with a Ferris wheel with a WordPress logo on it. I was like, man, we got to do that someday. Sometimes it'd be a WordPress, sometimes it'd be a M, sometimes it'd be an E. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to talk just a little bit about WordPress in 2023 and beyond. For those who I haven't met yet, my name is Matt Mullenweg, and about 20 years ago now, out of a single comment on my blog, Michael Little and I started working on what would become WordPress. And we did the first release, was it May? I think of 2003. And it's been kind of amazing watching WordPress grow and also growing up myself alongside all y'all. How much has changed over the past 20 years? You've seen me in a variety of hairstyles and beard lengths. Now I'm more conservative, like trying to look like a CEO look. But anyway, a few weeks ago, we did our version 6.3 release on August 8th. Who was involved with contributing to that, by the way? Raise your hand. Let's give a round of applause for these folks. Please stand up, actually. Yeah. If you worked on 6.3. Quick, come on, come on. Yeah. You saw a few of them, but there were actually over 640 contributors to that release. 207 of them were completely new to contributing to WordPress. And we did about 1,100 features, bug fixes, enhancements, performance improvements, accessibility improvements. It's a lot to talk about, so let's take a quick look at it. So we had a really fun video, really beautiful. Some cool music. Like a command line for WordPress. Yeah. There are thousands and thousands of little details in there. Like, notice the space theme, like a little homage to our opening keynote from NASA, which is pretty cool. For those who don't know, the NASA website's coming over to WordPress and getting some really cool stuff. My favorite is probably the command palette, which is essentially like a command line for WordPress. You do Control K, Command K, right? And immediately go and like jump to any part of it. It's pretty cool. One of our most feature-packed releases ever. But WordPress never rests. So right around the corner on November 7th, we're going to do version 6.4, which is coming out. It's going to be our, yeah. We're keeping up our pace of 3 major releases per year. we tried to move it to 4, but it seems like 3 is the right cadence for us right now. 6.4 is going to be similar to, I think it was 5.6, and that's going to be a underrepresented gender release squad. And there's some cool new features that are going to be in it. First I'll talk about is the new default theme, which will be 2024. This was actually introduced on Contributor Day. We're trying to tailor this theme not just for sort of the SMB use case or site creator use case, but actually for creators and bloggers in this. We had 31 people contribute to it at Contributor Day the other day, and you can read about the theme, and yeah, that was pretty cool. You can read about it and get involved on the make.wordpress.org/core P2. Other cool features that are coming up are font managements. So what you're going to see here is actually it's got the fonts that are built in. This is a library actually coming from Google right now of other fonts. And when you click on this, what it's actually going to do is import those files from Google, sideload them to your site so they can load completely locally, which is something we heard from, yeah. Something particularly our European WordPress community members have been big on. Hot linking from Google is actually like good for performance if it's already cached for other people, but then the loading on your own, like no request go to Google. So people like that. As we heard from some applause. I wasn't expecting any applause on that one. Next up, simple, but I'm really glad we're getting this in the core, which is image lightbox. So for those who aren't familiar with it, a lightbox is this idea that it's always never been really great in WordPress. What happens when you click on an image or an attachment? And what we're showing here, I think we're going to change the name because right now it's like called behaviors, and that's kind of a weird thing to call it. But basically what will happen is like now on the front end, when you click on an image, it'll kind of go full screen and zoom, and then you can navigate with keyboards. It works great and beautiful on mobile, and you can also zoom in further on that. Ta-da! Simple, but you've needed plugins for this forever. And so having like a super lightweight implementation in core is pretty exciting. So that's two of the features we want to talk about. The rest is being defined. So if you want to be part of defining what's in 6.4, please get involved. You can go to make.wordpress.org/core and join our WordPress.org Slack. We've got different channels for different interests in WordPress, including one that I'm about to announce a little bit later, a new one. But anyway, so with the end of 6.3, we are coming to the essentially like not finish line, but I'll call it checkbox for the second phase of Gutenberg. For those who don't remember, when we first announced Gutenberg many, many years ago, we said there's going to be 4 phases of its development. The first is focusing on the editor itself. So taking our old classic document-based editor, which was really hard to like align images and move embeds around. You had to use short codes to like do a lot of different richer functionality, and moved out all the blocks. So that was phase 1. Phase 2, which we call customization, is making it so those blocks were usable not just inside a post or a page, but you could actually modify the entire site. And that's, you're seeing a lot of new block themes, everything we just saw in that video. You're able to do things now by just clicking and moving things around that in prior years you would have needed to know CSS or hire a developer or something like that. And that's part of our mission to democratize publishing. WordPress is kind of like the original no-code tool, right? Before we're like, literally when I first started blogging, I'd upload files and modify a file and upload it and move things around. And then like the first CMSs automated a lot of that. It's all part of this kind of like efficient curve where things that used to be hard, what technology is beautiful at doing is, making it more accessible to a larger and larger audience. Phase 3 is now what we're heading into, which is actually the phase I think I've been saying is the one that I'm most excited about, because it's all about collaboration. So imagine this now taking WordPress and editing something from being single player to multiplayer. So what you're seeing on the screen here, it's looping, is those two, the little purple and the green, you might not be able to tell, but those actually have names underneath. I actually can't see what the names are. But that's basically 2 people editing the same post at the same time. Who's ever overridden someone else that's been editing something? Thank goodness for revisions. But now you'll be able to, whether it's sharing a draft with someone and getting feedback on it, whether it's, collaborating on designing something together. Maybe if you're like an agency or developer, you can invite a client into it directly, get on the phone with them and talk through it as you move things around. Like, it's so powerful what you'll be able to do with this. And again, like I said, moving WordPress from being kind of a single player to a multiplayer tool. Of course, anything that builds on top of Gutenberg, which all the best page builders and everyone is doing now, will get all these features for free as we start to build them in the core. And it's also really cool that just built into like browser technologies now, we can do this in a fairly efficient and in some places even kind of peer-to-peer browser way, which is pretty neat. So we're just now getting started at this. So if you want to have an impact on WordPress, go to make.wordpress.org/phase 3 is where we're going to be talking about this. So it'll be all about collaboration. We're actually going to be redesigning some of the admin to modernize it a little bit. The first big redesign probably since MP6, if anyone remembers that. It's going to be workflows. So like allowing plugins or maybe even some stuff in core to register different workflows. Like for example, maybe this role can edit the page, but someone else has to approve it to publish it. The command palette, revisions, we're going to get really much cooler on revisions. Block library, media library. I'm also really excited about finally looking at the media library. Like in that video, when you saw it, everything was looking really modern until the media picker popped up, right? And they were like, oh, this feels a little 2000s. So I'm glad to return to that. And also integrate things like Openverse. Those aren't familiar with it, we actually took over the Creative Commons search engine. It's now hosted on WordPress.org, and it's called Openverse, which is a beautiful library that indexes the whole web to find Creative Commons licensed content that you can use on your site with attribution or not if it's not required. So that is what is coming with Phase 3. Looking forward to seeing some of y'all on the P2 Slacks and at future contributor days as we define this together and start to build it. So thank you very much. I have one of these. Got just kind of two final things I wanted to end with. Oh, that was loud. Thank you, Taika. One really cool thing happened the other day here at WordCamp US, and I want to tell a story about it, which one thing that makes not just open source, but I think particularly the WordPress community really powerful is how people come together. And you see it even at like the booths and at the parties, like companies that in theory compete with each other are spending time together, sharing war stories, often even now sharing code, right? We all work together on some of the same common code. And it's kind of a beautiful example of what I think I was really originally inspired by open source and have done my best to try to bring into the world and simplify with my own companies. It's this idea of sort of like a positive sum capitalism where we can all win together and find areas to work together because we all have so much more in common than we have difference. One thing that has always been a little tricky about WordPress is that it's both a good and bad thing, is that there can be so many plugins that do the same thing. I say good and bad because that's great because it allows innovation that can happen. You kind of get almost like an evolutionary, natural selection. Some plugins thrive over the long term, some kind of fade away. They inspire each other. Good competition actually makes everyone better. Bad sometimes in that as a WordPress user, like if you go one plugin, you might be kind of locked in to it. There might not be interop. This was a big part of the inspiration for creating Gutenberg because we were seeing a lot of innovation from different kind of page builders and other things. But I started to hear from plugins like SEO plugins that said, hey, we're having to like rewrite our plugin to integrate like with 10 different builders. Like, can you create some standards in core, something that we can all agree on, which became Gutenberg and blocks that everyone can just build on top of. And then like the data models, everything are the same. So what happens, we're calling this WordPress LMS. Who's familiar with what an LMS stands for? So, a lot of people actually. More people than knew our democratized publishing mission. For those who don't know, an LMS stands for a learning management system. And it's a way to basically adopt a content management system for like online courses in ways that could be adjunct to something in person. They could have quizzes, they could have units, modules, there's a million different things. Anyway, this week, Tutor LMS, LearnDash, Lifter LMS, and Sensei all got together So these are 4 different plugins that provide LMS solutions. And the conversation was around what common data models can we do? So it's kind of 2 tracks. One was like within the WordPress world, like, can we actually agree on like using some of the same SQL formats? So like we have common like column names and tables. Since we're doing some very similar things, or we can at least create some abstractions between these different LMSs, could we make it so that there's not a lock-in and that users can get the freedom and choice to switch between these without having to port over all their content? Then second is that, are there industry standards? I didn't know a lot of this, but I learned some. There's like something called SCORM, I guess. There's some other, like, was it XAPI, or like there's a few different things there around industry standards around like what other software might be doing, or even some governments like ask people to put their content into. And are we, as a set of plugins within WordPress, again, we're always about user freedom and user choice. So are we doing everything we can to make sure we interop with those standards, have import or export or converters or things like that? The group came together. We decided to kick it off with a Slack channel. So there's now hashtag LMS in the WordPress.org Slack. It was kind of fun because it's, at the brainstorm stage. Obviously, there's other LMS plugins as well that weren't able to make it to WordCamp or weren't included yet. But now everyone involved in this space, or who's developing a solution around it, can come together, kind of agree on some de facto standards. We'll turn it into a document on a make blog. And then essentially now in the future, if you're choosing an LMS plugin, there'll probably be like a badge or something that folks who like apply to these standards and have the interop will have that badge. And so you'll be able to make an informed choice as a consumer in choosing. Again, freedom is not just always about the license. In WordPress, we have the GPL license, the 4 freedoms. Sometimes it's about like the practical interop. So very excited for that. And let's give a round of applause to the folks who came together on that. And I'd be lying if I tell you it didn't get me thinking about like, how can we get this kind of interop in our SEO plugins and the builder plugins, and probably a bunch of areas y'all are familiar with that I don't even know about. Like, how can we get, even when there's going to be different plugins, we definitely want canonical plugins for some areas, and we're going to do a lot more of that. But where there might be lots of different solutions, maybe dozens even, how can we get them maybe agreeing on some data models or something like that, so that there's a more standard and performant way to put all this in. And to me, this is really about long-term thinking. Like I said, we're about 20 years into WordPress, and we're thinking for the coming decades, and perhaps even beyond, how do we create a thriving, so go back to Josefa's word, community, software base, something that's always evolving. One of my favorite inspirations here is there's a cool foundation called the Long Now Foundation. They're involved with, you might have heard about this 10,000-year clock. Has anyone seen this? So cool. I actually got to visit it. It's like in a secret location in West Texas, and they're trying to design something, of course, thinking on 10,000 years, that can survive perhaps even a collapse of civilization. So the clock is kind of interesting in that it only shows the time when you kind of wind it up. So they're imagining like 5,000 years from now, someone might stumble across this cave and go through it and like kind of figure out what this thing is. And there's almost like a Rosetta Stone like way where it like explains how the clock works and how timekeeping. It kind of ties into some solar energy and stuff. But it needs to not be like solar panels, because that might not be as longevity. The other fun thing that Long Now Foundation does is when they talk about all of their years on their website, they say like, we were founded in 01996. Which is really nice, right? Because obviously at some point we're going to need to talk about years in 5 digits, not 4. So they're planning ahead. It's like for WordPress, I remember when we switched from being like int to big int, I was like, oh yeah, now we're ready. We got 64 bits of storage now with big int is 64, right? Who knows MySQL here? I should have looked that up before the talk. Other thing we just did, my company Automatic on WordPress.com, we just yesterday announced a 100-year hosting plan, which was, yeah, thank you. This was both a really interesting exercise as a company, like what would it mean to provide service for 100 years, what's it mean on top of the things we're built on? Like, for example, domains, you can only register 10 years at a time. So what we're doing is when someone signs up for this, we're going to register it for 10 years, then add a year on top of the 10 every year until 90. And then those last 10 years, it'll kind of come down. Hopefully we'll get some renewals on this. It got us talking a lot about, like, what's this for? And it was interesting how different people brought different ideas. Like, some people really thought about this is something you buy like at the end of your life. Actually, one of the ways I was thinking about it, because I've had some more godchildren being born recently. I'm up to 14 or 15 now. And I was like, okay, well, can I get them when they're born? I've been buying domains for them. But I was like, okay, but how cool would it be that, hey, now for 100 years, you both have a domain and something to run on it. But it was really difficult to think what this thing should cost. And thinking about, like, both what are the known and unknown cost for it, we ended up deciding on $38,000, which in some ways is a lot. Like, that's a really nice Camry or Corolla or something. In some ways, I wonder if it's too low, because, like, we try to model in inflation and different, cost of underlying things like the .com registration or domain registrations. But again, like, what does it look like to provide this service, including with support 50 years, 80 years from now? What technology are we using? Will we have to do like VR support or metaverse support? Well, it's kind of. But those thought exercises are really interesting. It also got me thinking about lifetime licenses, which I think we should stop doing in the WordPress world. Also, like, if you've ever worked with an accountant or an acquirer, they don't like when you have those because essentially it's an open-ended commitment, including often with support. How do you recognize that revenue? There's all sorts of reasons that I think, offer a 20-year plan or something. But I think when you're saying lifetime, it sort of cheapens the word. And so if we're really thinking the long term and what promises we're making to our customers, I think we should re-examine those practices as well. So I'd encourage you all, like, as we're in the United States Capitol, or kind of right next to it, but we're going there for the social later, right? Are y'all excited about the Smithsonian Museum? How cool is that? Gosh, if you have any extra time in the DC area, the museums here are really like one of a kind in the world. And it's pretty amazing to walk around, the architecture, the monuments. I really admire about this city how there is a lot of honoring for the past. And I think from the founding fathers as well, like thinking about the long term. I'll butcher another quote from some presidents, like, democracy, it's yours if you choose to treat it well, choose to keep it. What was that quote? I forget it. Best system as long as you can keep it. There's all these sorts of things that kind of show also, like, the need for iteration, the need to be able to patch things like the Constitution. And you have to get 2/3 committers from the states, right? That's a lot of LGTM, right? On those pull requests. I also think about, like, more how open source can influence things like how legislation is created. You hear about how people do scripts or how bills are made, and they're emailing around PDFs and printing things out at the last minute. Like, how much cooler could something like source control or Git or something else apply to some of these areas? Some of what we learned in software about working together, both in person, but also from around the world, apply to these areas. So think about that long-term thinking, as you admire the beautiful stuff around us at the Smithsonian, and hopefully get to explore a little bit later. And that's where we're going to end it, because I don't want this to be too long-term of a talk.